A mariachi band in the middle of a candlelit restaurant. My wife's face drained of color. And her lover, the bastard, dropped his fork mid-bite. I sat at the bar, nursing a whiskey, watching the whole thing unfold like a slow-motion car wreck. The band was good, damn good. Full brass, deep vocals, loud enough that the whole place turned to watch. Haley's mouth moved, but no words came out. Hunter, chef coat unbuttoned just enough to look casual, froze, eyes darting to the exits like a cornered rat. I let it sink in, let them squirm. Then I tossed a 50 on the bar, gave the bartender a nod, and walked out. My name's Garrett Stewart. I'm 48. I run Stewart Auto Repair on the outskirts of Austin. Used to run with the Iron Fangs back in the day, biker crew that did more than just ride. But that life's long behind me. Did a couple years in Huntsville for a job gone wrong, and when I got out, I decided I wasn't going back. Built something for myself instead, nothing fancy, just a garage where folks know they'll get a fair deal. I've been married to Haley for 20 years. Thought we were solid. I worked, she climbed the corporate ladder, and we made it work. Or so I thought. Lately, she'd been coming home late, showering before bed, always guarding her phone like it held state secrets. I had a feeling something was off, but I wasn't the type to snoop. Then Pete, the guy who runs the Shell station down the road, let something slip. Man, I swear I saw Haley with some dude at the Copper Fork last week. Thought nothing of it, but they looked, I dunno, cozy. I didn't react. Just let the words settle. Cozy. Pete wasn't the type to stir shit, so I checked. Not like some lovesick fool begging for the truth. I went about it like a mechanic working a bad engine. Quiet. Methodical. Hired a PI, let him do the digging. And when I saw the photos, Haley, leaning into some smooth-talking, apron-wearing asshole, I didn't feel heartbreak, just cold certainty. That's when I planned the serenade. The shop was quiet when I got back. The smell of motor oil, steel, and old rubber had always been comforting. It was a place that made sense. Problems came in, you fixed them, and they ran better than before. If only people were that simple. Cameron, my apprentice, was wiping down tools when I walked in. 19, fresh out of high school, trying to keep from slipping into the kind of trouble I used to get into. Kid had potential. You good, boss? He glanced up, frowning. Yeah. I grabbed a rag, started cleaning my hands even though I hadn't touched anything. He didn't push, just nodded and went back to tightening bolts on a 78 Firebird we'd been working on. That's what I liked about him. Didn't talk just to hear himself talk. My phone buzzed. Haley. I let it ring. 5 seconds later, a text. We need to talk. Damn right we do. But not tonight. Tonight I let her sit with it. I set my phone down, cracked open a cold one from the fridge in the back, and leaned against the workbench. Cameron hesitated, then grabbed a soda and did the same. After a minute, he asked, You ever had one of those days where you just want to break something? I chuckled. Yeah, kid. Had a few. He nodded like he got it. We sat in silence. The only sounds the ticking of the cooling engine and the distant hum of the highway. I took a long drink and stared at the wall. Tomorrow I'd start setting the stage. Tomorrow they'd start paying. I woke up before sunrise, same as always. The shop was quiet. The streets outside empty except for a few early risers heading to work. I brewed a pot of coffee, black and strong, and leaned against the counter, watching the slow drip fill the pot. My phone sat on the table face down. I hadn't checked the messages. Didn't need to. I already knew what they'd say. By the time I got to the shop, Riley was already there, hunched over the counter, tapping away on his laptop like some kind of techno gremlin. Tall, lanky, wore the same damn hoodie every day like it was a uniform. No small talk, just a muttered, morning. As he scrolled through code or whatever it was he did. Find anything yet? I poured myself another coffee and leaned against the counter. He snorted. Find anything? Man, she might as well have handed me her phone and said, Enjoy. I pulled her call logs, messages, even her GPS history. She's been meeting Loverboy at his apartment, at hotels, hell, even at the gym. I exhaled slow, taking it in. I'd expected as much, but hearing it confirmed put a weight in my chest. Not pain, just something solid. Final. Riley turned his laptop toward me. Texts are pretty standard cheating bullshit. I miss you. Can't wait to see you again. He doesn't understand me. He rolled his eyes. Classic. I glanced at the screen, read a few messages, then pushed the laptop back. I don't need to read that. Fair enough. He cracked his knuckles. What's the next move? I already had it planned. I want his life to go up in smoke. Not illegal. Not physical. Just wreck his world. Riley smirked. Now you're speaking my language. I handed him an envelope. Cash. First thing, make sure his wife knows. Hannah Jensen. Riley whistled. Damn. You want a front row seat for that one? Nope. Just make sure she finds out the right way. Make it so she sees it, reads it, believes it. I set down my coffee. She deserves to know. Cold, he muttered. I like it. I stepped outside, let the crisp morning air clear my head. Across the street, Pete was wiping down the gas pumps, whistling some old country tune. He spotted me and waved. Garrett, you look like a man with a plan. Something like that, I called back. He walked over, wiping his hands on a rag. You ever gonna tell me what that whole mariachi thing was about? I smirked. Just making a point. Pete chuckled. Hell of a point. You should have seen people talking about it after you left. That was some legendary level of I caught you, you cheating bitch. I took a sip of coffee. I don't believe in screaming matches. A message hits harder when you don't yell it. Pete nodded, then lowered his voice. Listen, I don't want to stir anything, but I saw her and that guy again. He came through here a lot. Always in his white chef coat like he wants people to know he cooks for a living. Appreciate it, I said. He hesitated. You all right, man? I'm fine. And I was. Because now it wasn't about feelings. It was about handling business. Back in the shop, Cameron had already started work on the Firebird. I watched him for a second, his sleeves rolled up, forehead lined with grease. Hard work. Honest work. Nothing like the kind of shit Haley and her boy Toy got wrapped up in. I clapped a hand on his shoulder. Looking good, kid. He grinned. Told you I could do it. That was the thing about Cameron, he wanted to prove himself. Didn't want anyone handing him a damn thing? I respected that. I grabbed my phone and dialed a number I hadn't in years. Ray picked up on the second ring. Didn't think I'd hear from you again, he said. I need some information, I replied. There was a pause, then a chuckle. Now that sounds like the Garrett I remember. What kind of information? I glanced at Riley, who was still clicking away at his laptop, and then back out at the street where Pete was filling up a truck's gas tank. Everything was falling into place. The kind that ruins a man's reputation, I said. Ray didn't ask for details. He never did. That's what made him useful. He just muttered something about making a few calls and hung up. I slid my phone back into my pocket and turned to Riley, who was still glued to his screen. All right, I said. Let's talk about that fundraiser. Riley cracked his neck and grinned. Oh, now this is gonna be good. The event was one of those high society charity gigs, the kind Haley thrived in, rubbing elbows with corporate big shots, sipping overpriced wine, pretending she wasn't from the same dusty Texas town as the rest of us. Hunter had a catering deal lined up, a big one. Some hotel execs were going to be there, a few restaurant critics, people who could make or break his career. Perfect. I had Pete, my gas station guy, print up a few pictures from Riley's stash. Nothing too nasty, just enough to paint the picture. A few screenshots of texts, a photo of Haley and Hunter at a hotel bar, heads close, hands on each other like they thought no one was watching. These would go in a handful of carefully selected hands, Hannah, Hunter's wife, for one. And a few others who mattered. The fundraiser was at some swanky venue downtown, all polished glass and white tablecloths. I wasn't the type to blend in at these things, so I didn't try. Black jeans, boots, and my old leather jacket. I wasn't there to schmooze. I was there to burn things down. Inside, the air smelled like money and expensive perfume. People in designer suits clinked glasses, pretending to give a damn about whatever cause they were throwing money at. I spotted Haley near the back, in a sleek navy dress, her hair done up in a way that made her look even more polished than usual. She was laughing at something Hunter said, hand on his arm, completely at ease. She had no idea. I didn't go straight to them. No, that would have been too easy. I made my way to the bar, ordered a whiskey neat, and watched. Across the room, Hannah Jensen arrived, looking sharp in a dark red dress, completely oblivious to what was coming. Riley had made sure she'd get a message right about now. I checked my watch. And there it was, the exact moment she read it. I saw it in the way her face shifted. The tension in her jaw, the way her grip tightened on her clutch. She looked up, scanning the room, and when her eyes landed on Hunter, I knew she'd pieced it together. Showtime. I took a slow sip of my drink as she stormed across the floor. The murmur of conversation dipped as she reached Hunter, who had just taken a sip of his own drink. She snatched the glass from his hand and threw it in his face. "You lying, cheating piece of shit." Her voice carried through the entire hall. The room fell silent. Heads turned. People in suits and evening gowns whispered behind their hands. Hunter blinked, water dripping from his face, completely caught off guard. Haley reached for her. "Hannah." "Shut up," Hannah snapped, turning on her. You self-righteous bitch. How long?" Haley's face went pale, her mouth opening and closing like she was searching for the right words. I leaned against the bar, watching it unfold, letting the weight of public humiliation do its work. Letting the people around them judge, whisper, distance themselves. It was one thing to cheat. It was another to get caught like this in front of the same people they wanted to impress. Hunter tried to take Hannah's arm. Let's talk about this in private." She yanked away from him. "Private? You want privacy now? After sneaking around behind my back for a goddamn year." Haley, ever the professional, tried to salvage it. "Hannah, please, let's not make a scene." "Oh, we're past that," Hannah cut in. "You're a joke. Both of you. And you." She turned to Hunter with a look so sharp it could have cut glass. "You better hope your career survives this, because I sure as hell won't be helping you rebuild." She stormed out, heels clicking against the floor, leaving behind a stunned silence. Hunter stood there, dripping, humiliated, and Haley? She looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. I tossed back the rest of my drink and set the glass down. As I turned to leave, I caught Haley's eyes. She knew. She knew this wasn't just bad luck. I gave her a slow nod, then walked out into the night. I drove back to the shop, letting the night air cool me down. Windows down, one hand on the wheel, the city lights stretching out ahead. I could still see the look on Haley's face when she realized what was happening. That moment when the mask slipped, when she understood she wasn't in control anymore. I wasn't the fool she thought I was. By the time I pulled into the lot, the shop was quiet. Cameron had locked up, but the Firebird was still in the bay waiting on a few finishing touches. I grabbed a wrench, popped the hood, and got to work. Some men drank themselves stupid when they were angry. Some broke shit. Me? I fixed things. The rhythmic clank of metal on metal, the smell of grease, the feel of warm steel under my hands, it did what whiskey never could. Let me focus. Let me think. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't have to look. I knew who it was. Haley had tried calling earlier. I'd ignored it. Let her sit with it. Another buzz. This time a message. "We need to talk. Now." I wiped my hands, picked up the phone, and thought about it. Then I grabbed my keys and headed out. She was waiting at the house when I pulled up, arms crossed, pacing near the porch. Her hair was still pinned up from the fundraiser, but the polish was gone. She looked worn, frayed around the edges. "Garrett," she started, voice tight. "What the hell was that?" I stepped out of the truck, shut the door slow. "That?" I said, walking toward her. "That was you getting exactly what you deserved." She huffed out a laugh, shaking her head. "You're proud of yourself? Humiliating me like that?" I leaned against the porch railing. "Haley, don't stand there and act like you're the victim." Her eyes flashed. "This isn't just about me. Do you know what you've done? I have a career, Garrett. You think these people won't talk? You think this won't what?" I cut in. "Ruin your reputation? Make people see you for what you are? That's the point, sweetheart." She took a sharp breath, then squared her shoulders. "We need to figure out what happens next." "There's nothing to figure out." I kept my voice even, controlled. "You packed your bags yet?" Her face twitched. "Garrett, let's be rational, Oh, now you want to be rational?" I scoffed. "You weren't rational when you were sneaking off to hotel rooms. You weren't rational when you decided to blow up our marriage for a goddamn chef with a nice smile." She didn't deny it. Just stood there, jaw tight. "I never meant to hurt you." I laughed low and bitter. "That's the thing about people like you, Haley. You don't mean to hurt anyone. You just do." She swallowed, looking away for a second. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter. "So that's it? You're just done?" I let the silence stretch before I answered. "Yeah, I am." Her throat bobbed, but she nodded like she'd expected it. "Fine." I watched as she turned, walked back inside. She didn't slam the door, didn't cry, didn't beg. Just disappeared into the house like a ghost, like she'd already started fading from my life. And that was fine. Because tomorrow, I'd make sure she was gone for good. The morning after she left, the house was quieter. Not that it had ever been loud, we weren't the type to argue much, not even when things had started to go south, but there was a difference. A weight gone. No more tension hanging in the air. No more perfume lingering in the bathroom, no more laptop open on the kitchen counter with work emails she pretended I wasn't allowed to see. I made coffee the same way I always did, black and strong, and took it out to the porch. The air was crisp, the sun just starting to burn through the last bit of morning haze. My truck sat in the driveway, the shop waiting for me down the road. The garage wasn't just work. It was my space. A place I built with my own hands. A place that had nothing to do with her. By the time I got there, Cameron was already in, wiping down a set of tools. He glanced up, gave a nod. She gone? I took a sip of coffee. Yeah. He didn't say sorry, didn't give me some sympathetic look. Just grunted, like that was that, and went back to work. That's why I liked the kid. I went to my desk, checked invoices, ran through the day's schedule. Business as usual. But there was something in me, something that said this isn't enough anymore. I'd built this place to start over. To prove I wasn't just some ex-con biker who got lucky. But now? Maybe it was time to do more. I flipped through my old notebook, the one where I wrote ideas down late at night when my head wouldn't shut up. A second shop. A mentorship program. Taking in kids who needed a break, the way I had when I got out. Cameron, I called out, setting the notebook down. He wiped his hands on a rag, walked over. Yeah? You like working here? He frowned like it was a trick question. Yeah. It's better than the other shit I could be doing. I nodded. What if I brought in more guys like you? Gave him a shot. He thought about it for a second. You mean like kids who got nowhere else to go? Something like that. He cracked a grin. Hell, boss, that might be the first good idea you've had. I snorted. Watch it, kid. But the thought stuck. Maybe tearing something down wasn't enough. Maybe it was time to build something real. Before I could dive too deep into that thought, my phone buzzed on the desk. I glanced at the screen. Brielle. I just stared at it for a second. My daughter didn't call. She sent Christmas cards out of obligation. I hadn't heard her voice in almost a year. I let it ring twice before I picked up. Hey. There was a pause, like she wasn't sure she'd made the right choice calling. Then, hey, Dad? She sounded older. More sure of herself. Heard about Mom, she said. No pity in her voice, just fact. Yeah. Another pause. You okay? I ran a hand over my jaw, took a breath. I am. She let that sit for a second, then said, I want to come down. See the shop. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Then I nodded even though she couldn't see me. I'd like that. All right, she said. See you soon. She hung up before I could say anything else. I set the phone down, exhaled slow. Some things you couldn't fix with a wrench. But maybe, just maybe, they weren't beyond repair. The day she was supposed to show up, I worked like usual, hands deep in an old Ford's engine, trying not to think too much about it. But every time a car pulled into the lot, I found myself glancing up, half expecting it to be her. Cameron caught me doing it once, smirked, but didn't say anything. Smart kid. By noon, I had grease up to my elbows and a streak of oil on my shirt when a dark blue sedan rolled in. She stepped out slow, like she was testing the ground, like maybe she'd turn right back around if it didn't feel right. Brielle looked different. Taller, leaner. Her hair pulled back tight like her mother used to wear it, but the rest of her was all her own. I wiped my hands on a rag, took a breath, and walked over. Hey, kid. She hesitated just a second, then nodded. Hey. We stood there, neither of us sure what to say next. So I did what I always did when words failed, kept moving. Come on, I said, jerking my head toward the garage. Let me show you around. She followed me inside, her eyes scanning the place, taking it in. The smell of oil and metal, the organized chaos of parts and tools. I saw something flicker in her expression, something like recognition. I remember the smell, she said, running a hand along the edge of a workbench. Yeah? She nodded. You used to come home covered in it. I chuckled. Still do. Cameron walked by, gave her a quick nod. You must be Brielle. She raised an eyebrow. And you are. Cameron. I work here. Try to keep your old man from breaking things. I snorted. Watch it. Cameron smirked but kept walking. Brielle glanced around again. It's different than I pictured. How's that? She shrugged. I don't know. Bigger. More put together. I guess I always thought of it as some tiny hole in the wall with a neon open sign flickering on and off. I smirked. Not quite. We walked the length of the shop and I explained what we were working on, an old Camaro getting new guts, a truck that belonged to a guy who'd been coming here for years, the Firebird that Cameron had practically claimed as his own project. She listened, asked a few questions, her guard lowering bit by bit. Then, out of nowhere, she said, Mom's a mess. I leaned against the workbench. Yeah? Brielle crossed her arms. She won't admit it, but she's unraveling. I think she thought she'd come out of this clean, like she'd just move on and everything would fall into place. She exhaled sharply. It's not. People at work look at her different. Her friends aren't as close as they used to be. And Hunter? He's useless. His business is going under. She backed the wrong horse. I nodded, letting the words settle. I wasn't gonna gloat. I didn't need to. She studied me. You don't look angry. I met her gaze. I was. For a while. But anger doesn't build anything. It just burns. She nodded like she understood. Maybe she did. After a beat, she gestured toward a car under a tarp. What's that? Project I've been thinking about. She tilted her head. Thinking about? Haven't decided what to do with it yet. She looked at me, really looked at me, then said, well, maybe I can help. Something in my chest tightened, not in a bad way. I nodded. Yeah. Maybe you can. We didn't say much after that, but she didn't leave right away either. She stuck around, watched, asked a few more questions. By the time she finally did head out, she left behind something I hadn't expected. A promise. Unspoken, but real. She'd be back. A week later, I was closing up the shop when Pete pulled in, his truck rumbling like it was running on spite and duct tape. He rolled down the window, grinning like he had something good. You see the news? He asked. I wiped my hands on a rag. Do I look like I keep up with the news? He chuckled. Figured you'd appreciate this one. He pulled out his phone, thumbed through a few screens, then held it up. The headline was enough. Jensen's fine dining closes amid financial scandal, legal troubles. I let out a slow breath. Not surprise, not satisfaction, just confirmation. The bastard had been bleeding money after the fundraiser disaster. Lost a few key investors, some clients pulled out, and Hannah? She'd gone for the throat in the divorce. Word was she had a damn good lawyer, too. He didn't stand a chance. Pete watched me. Ain't gonna say anything? I tossed the rag onto the counter. Nothing to say. He laughed. You cold as hell, Garrett. I shrugged. Man did it to himself. Pete nodded, then leaned on the doorframe. And Haley. I grabbed my beer off the workbench, took a sip. She's still got her job. Barely. Her boss doesn't trust her, her friends don't answer her calls, and from what I hear, she's realizing real damn fast that the life she thought she deserved isn't coming easy. He let out a low whistle. Brutal. She made her choices. I drained the beer, set the bottle down, and I made mine. Pete clapped me on the shoulder. Well, hell, I'll drink to that. The next morning, I walked out onto the porch with my coffee and watched the sunrise. The air smelled like fresh rain, the road slick but quiet. I sat down, stretched out my legs, and let it all settle, the silence, the stillness, the way the past few months had unfolded exactly how they needed to. My phone buzzed. A message. Brielle, coming by later. Got some ideas for that car. I smirked, took a sip of coffee. Some people burn bridges. Me? I built roads.